Getting to know the Bible. Father Claudio Doglio. The Gospel according to Mathew. Passion, death and resurrection according to Mathew. The vertex of each Gospel tells about the passion, death and resurrection of Jesus. So also the evangelist Matthew places decisive events at the top of his narrative. The story of the Passion is told in the four Gospels in 2 chapters. They usually correspond in all four narrations because the Passion story was inevitably the first story to be formed. It is the basis of apostolic preaching. The announcement of the resurrection of Christ led to the narration of how he died, why he died, and what were the decisive facts of his life. Therefore, we find the same story, however conspicuously mediated in four different ways. Each of the evangelists has given his own touch to this story. Mark highlights, above all, the impact of the events, the drama of rapidly unfolding events. Luke gives a pedagogical, sweet tone, soft to events, showing the innocent not abandoned neither by the people nor by the Father. The good attitude of Jesus who looks converts Peter. The word of forgiveness for those who kill him. John delves into the theological path and presents the glory of the cross, the raising of the King on the throne from where he draws everyone to himself. Matthew respects the traditional scheme in most of the events, with some particular nuances from a more catechetical tone. In some cases, he intervenes precisely to show the meaning of the events. We notice this catechetical nuance of Matthew, particularly in the episode of the arrest of Jesus, when the disciple draws his sword to strike those who came to arrest the Master. Jesus told him to put his sword back in its place and adds a proverb. All those who take the sword will die of the sword. It is not with violence that you respond to violence. It is not the way of Jesus. Do not oppose the wicked, he had said in the discourse on the mountain. Concretely, Jesus now applies this style and still specifies, do you think that I cannot ask the Father to send me more than 12 legions of angels at once? If he wanted to oppose, he would have 12 legions of angels available, no comparison to 12 disciples, among whom there is a traitor. I could, but I don't want to. I don't use force. I do not choose these supernatural methods, but I abandon myself to violence, and I give in just to carry out God's project. If I were to oppose with violence or using angels, how would the scripture be fulfilled according to which it must happen? This is the way of God, of humility and passion, of responding to evil with good, with meekness. And this is the way Jesus turns the table around and saves humanity. This discourse at that tragic moment is a typical element of Matthew. It is a kind of catechetical synthesis in which the evangelist puts into the mouth of Jesus the call to the fundamental elements of his catechesis. Another typical aspect of Matthew is the insistence on the role of Judas. It's just Matthew who narrates, among other things, the reaction of Judas after seeing Jesus condemned and the tragedy of his suicide. Let us not easily take this role of Judas for granted. Many times, it has been spoken of a tragic role of a predestined man, like that he had to do what he did. It was necessary for God's project to be fulfilled. It is not true at all. Jesus was not a fugitive, hiding who knows where, who could not be found. He was in the temple every day. Therefore, if we reason, we see that the role of Judas was minimal. It was not essential in order to arrest Jesus. It was just convenient for the temple authorities to arrest Jesus in secret when no one saw them. Apprehending him on the temple esplanade, it would have caused a riot of the people and some disturbances. Judas has not betrayed Jesus for economic reasons. It is not the desire for money that prompted him. They promise him 30 denarii. The denarius is generally evaluated as the wage of a worker per day. Therefore, 30 denarii correspond to an average monthly salary that today we could qualify 30 denarii with about $500. A friend is not betrayed for such a small amount. And then, for what reason does Judas think he should hand over Jesus to earn that little money? There is probably something else behind it. Judas follows Jesus. He is linked to Jesus. He is his disciple. In fact, the verb used in the Greek text is not the verb betray, but rather to deliver. Judas is not the traitor, but the one who delivers Jesus. It sounds very different. It is that we are accustomed to the word betray, and we have also been betrayed in understanding. The Greek word paradidomi is the one that translates in Latin as contract, tradere, which gives origin in English to trade. Tradere is tradition. It is transmission, handing over one to another. Why has Judas delivered Jesus? We do not have precise indications. We can only imagine, but most likely Jesus was too slow for Judas, too tame, too weak. Judas must have wanted to force time. He probably thought, Jesus does not reveal himself. He does not make himself known. He does not oppose vigorously. It is necessary to pressure him to really say who he is in such a way that the authorities recognize him, agree, and proceed to liberation work. Judas probably thought that he was helping God's project, doing it on his own. He did it for good. He gave Jesus in such a way that Jesus would have the opportunity to speak face to face with the highest authorities in Israel, confident that they would have understood Jesus, that they would agree, and that it would have finally begun the great work of liberation. In fact, when Judas realizes that Jesus did not reveal himself, abandoned himself, and was sentenced, even when they brought him to Pilate to be sentenced to death, Judas was very distressed. Then Judas the traitor, seeing that he had been condemned, repented and returned the 30 coins to the chief priests and elders, saying, I have sinned by delivering an innocent man to death. They replied, What about us? That is your problem. This report is a typical item from Mathew. The reaction of the priestly authorities of the temple shows spiritual narrowness. They have gotten what they were looking for. They have used Judas to strike without attracting attention. Judas's conscience problems are his. We just do not care. Do what you want, fix it as you want. They kick him out. They have used him, and now they discard him. When poor Judas sees that things don't go according to what he had thought, he laments, repents, and admits that he has sinned. I have handed innocent blood into their hands. That is, an innocent person that you have condemned to death and will spill his blood. I have the responsibility, but it is not what I wanted. This is the Judas drama. He is a disciple who wants to do things his ways, who follows Jesus but does not listen to him and would like to teach him to be a Messiah and imposes something on him, and discovers the drama of being responsible, but he did not want to be. Judas' worst mistake was not trusting in God's mercy. He threw the money into the sanctuary, left, and hanged himself. This is the drama of not trusting in mercy. And in any case, we have no possibility of affirming that even Judas was condemned. He may have accepted God's mercy and opened up. It is the drama of a stubborn disciple, very similar to us. Judas's betrayal is very similar to the betrayal of many Christians who follow Jesus, but want to make him do what they have in mind to achieve good according to their patterns and their tastes. They want to master him and bend him. Unfortunately, this attempt is always dramatic and fallacious. Jesus is condemned by Pilate, taken to the place of execution, hung on the cross. There he is outraged and ridiculed by the people present. He ends his life with a loud cry, Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani. Thus, Matthew mentions the beginning of Psalm 21 in Hebrew. It marks the beginning of an important biblical prayer. If we do not take into account that it is a psalm, a long psalm with many themes, we run the risk of reading in this word of Jesus as almost despair. My God, why have you abandoned me? And then it is possible to reflect on the feeling of abandonment or on the theological problem. How God can be abandoned by God? But it doesn't seem like the best way to understand the text. If we reread the entire psalm, we realize that it is a very beautiful prayer of trust. Not only that, but in the second part of the psalm, it is the announcement of life, the fulfillment that the Lord has offered to his servant, the guarantee that he will live and have a descendant. It's a prayer of trust. Quoting the first verse helps the evangelist to say that Jesus prayed with the words of the Psalms, particularly with that psalm. From that text, Jesus took verses for his prayer. Jesus prayed with the Psalms until the extreme moment of his life. His prayer is made up of verses from the Psalms. The last cry is a declaration of confidence. Inside this psalm, there is a particular verse where it says, "From my mother's womb, you are my God." In Hebrew, Eli Atta. Some of those present, upon hearing him, commented, "He is calling Elijah. Eli, my God. Atta, you are my God." It is the final cry of Jesus, a cry of great confidence, of abandonment. In spite of everything, you are my God. But an Aramaic ear could have understood the word slightly differently. They could have heard Elia Ta. The same phrase, heard, if written in Aramaic, means Elijah, come. That is why some of those present, upon hearing him, commented, "He is calling for Elijah." Immediately, one of them ran, took a sponge soaked in vinegar, and gave him a drink with a cane. The others said, "Wait, let us see if Elijah comes to save him." Elijah does not come. It is the final misunderstanding. Jesus was not calling Elijah. Jesus trusted his God, put his life in the hands of the Father. The death of Jesus is accompanied by apocalyptic phenomena. They all specify that the veil of the temple was torn, the earth shook, and Matthew adds, the rocks were broken, the earthquake, the rocks that break, the tombs that open, are eschatological signs. Is it the end of the world? Yes, it is the end of a world. With the death of Jesus, there is an end. There is a fulfillment. There is a reversal of the situation, especially that earthquake that opens the tombs. It is the apocalyptic image of the catastrophe. The word catastrophe in Greek means this gesture that we make accompanying the idea of change. Things have changed from like this to like this. A catastrophe is turn what is below and put it up. It is the reversal of destiny. The earthquake is a very frequent apocalyptic symbol to indicate the intervention of God. Things are devastated. They are not like before. It is the structure of the world that is upset. And since the structure was negative and corrupt, reversal means correction, salvation. It is the same image of the earthquake that the evangelist Matthew takes at the time of the resurrection. Let us not forget that the evangelists do not narrate the resurrection, but the visit of the women and the disciples to the empty tomb. They tell the experience of the empty tomb and the encounter with the risen one, but not the moment of the resurrection. At the beginning of chapter 28, the last of his gospel, Matthew writes, "In the end of the Sabbath, as it began to dawn towards the first day of the week, came Mary Magdalene and the other Mary to see the sepulchre. And behold, there was a great earthquake, for the angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone from the door and sat upon it. His countenance was like lightning, and his raiment white as snow." It is an apocalyptic description. The angel is like lightning and that shakes the earth. It is the description that only Matthew presents to explain the event, that it was God who intervened and reversed the situation from above. The great earthquake characterizes the reversal of the situation. The angel of the Lord rolls the stone. It is the image of evil. It is death. It is that stone placed on which everything hides. We say a stone was placed on top to mean that something is dead and buried. Everything is finished. But instead, the lightning from heaven shakes the earth, moves the stone, and the victorious angel sits on it. He is sitting on the symbol of death. And the risen Christ meets the women and the disciples and sends them all over the world. We have come to fulfillment. "I have been given full authority in heaven and on earth. Go and make disciples among all the peoples." It is the beginning of the mission of the church and the end of the gospel. We had started from this end because everything starts from here. With the experience of the risen Christ, the disciples and Matthew among them went back to the beginning and remembered what happened, and they told us about it, so that we too become his disciples. Listening to the gospel, understanding it well, helps us each time to grow in this dimension of disciples. We are called to learn from Jesus in person, to truly become his disciples. I sincerely hope that you listen to these words and read these texts, helping you to become better disciples of Jesus.